In African homes, every child is taught to respect their elders, and family is defined by more than blood. 60,000 years ago, the elders of Africa's children began a series of worldwide migration, spreading the seed of humanity to every corner of the earth, taking with them the gift of adaptation, imagination, and the determination to survive. They carried the first stories, tools, and no matter where we now call home, we are, every one of us, a distant child of African soil. Time seems to erase the footprint leading back to our common heritage. Africa's lost children kept only dim recollection of home, myth, tales, and half-forgotten dreams. Early humans took fire to light their way out of Africa, but generations later brought back a darkness that still cloaks and too often defined the continent. Sadly, when the children of Africa's first diaspora returned, they didn't recognize their brothers and sisters, blind even to their humanity. My name is Abdullah Jallo. Welcome to Africa Inside Out. How does the world see Africa and the many people who call Africa home? Is this how the world sees me?
Into the strange and wild interior of darkest Africa, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer sent a motion picture company on safari. Here in its original setting, where no white woman had ever been before, was filmed the story of primitive savagery, of incredible danger.
King Solomon's mine.
Umgawa. Umgawa. Umgawa.
How does the world's perception of Africa and Africans affect the lives and fortune of our children? I began our conversation with Amini Kajunjo, the first African woman to head the Africa America Institute. Ms. Kajunjo discussed her concept of the 3Ds, death, disease, and despair, and the obstacles they represent to a fuller and more comprehensive understanding of Africa and African people. What is the perception of Africa in the world's imagination, and how does it relate to your concept of the 3Ds?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it even started the day I set foot in the United States. As a young girl, I just did not realize that people saw the continent the way they did. And I remember people telling me, asking me if I had a pet lion, if lions lived in my backyard. You know, and I used to joke, and I'd say, yes, I do have a pet lion. I actually miss my pet lion and my pet elephant and my pet this, just to, you know, turn a very ridiculous question into, you know, some comedy, because it was actually quite painful. And for me, you know, my growing up in Kinshasa, what I remember was we had plenty of food, we had lots of space to have fun. We were surrounded by family, and yes, there were challenges, of course, but I never thought of the African continent as a place of just death, disease, despair. Mm-hmm. But spending some time here outside of the continent, that's what people kept throwing at me, and I found myself constantly having to defend the continent and saying, yes, people are suffering, yes, there are challenges, but people go about their business on a daily basis, doing very normal things, going to work, taking their kids to school, getting married, you know, all the things that are happening all over the world, but right. But most people don't attribute those activities to the continent.
The perception of the African is, I teach a class here, and I use part of my travels to discuss with the students. So as opposed to my perception of Africa, I ask each student to give me one word to describe Africa. And what are the words I get? Jungle, animals roaming all over the place, you know, the whole place is a forest, no internet, no television. I ask the students, how much have you ever studied Africa in your life? No, they know nothing. Now, Africa is the largest continent there is. I mean, so how is it that a student can go up and graduate from a high school in New York City and know nothing about Africa except what he sees in the movies?
What do you think about the perception of Africa in the world?
When we hear about Africa, we hear about all the negative things. And there's certain negative things that are happening. But people just associate that. I always look at things in terms of, for instance, something as trivial as cartoons. You know, look at Disney. And Disney has had their hero cartoons. You had Pocahontas. You know, that's a troublesome history right there. But she was portrayed as a heroine. You know, she helped the good white man do a number of different things. Blah, blah. You had Mulan, and she was a heroine who did things in China. And then we went to Africa, and what did we have? We had the Lion King. Now, they went from human beings as heroes
To the animals.
to the animals. Are you saying that there is no heroic African woman or man that you could have portrayed in a cartoon that would have been acceptable to an American public? That's a problem. That's a problem.
Because it's a very deliberate situation in this country that we only see news that's negative about Africa. That's not by accident, that's by design. And we have to understand that it's a very deliberate thing ever since the transatlantic slave trade to make us feel ashamed of being from Africa, number one, and then making everyone else feel that, oh, Africa is such a horrifying place, thank God you're not there.
I know that people have so many simplified conceptions of Africa. I mean, for me, it conjures positive feelings mostly because I've had so many amazing, some of the best experiences of my life in Africa. So I immediately think about beauty and excitement and adventure and warmth, you know, and hospitality. But I don't think I have a very typical, you know, way of thinking about it. I mean, a lot of people, they just think about what they see on the news. They think about war and disease and all of that.
You do find the quality things, or you do find all what you're seeking on the continent. There is, of course, this image which has been put on the continent, which we need to change. And in my view, and I call upon all both diaspora, but mostly the young people on the African continent to get on a drive of giving out the other message. When you don't control what is being said about you, you will not say, people will only hear about you, what someone else is saying. So it's quite important that people of the continent, or young people from the continent, they can come out in numbers and actually show what we're doing on the continent.
Well, I'm a diaspora African. I spent a lot of time in the United States, I spent a lot of time in Africa, and I felt like I wanted to write a book that could explain one community to the other. And I wanted to write a book about Africa that was fun, that was irreverent, that was informative, but that wasn't depressing, because I didn't see anything like that out there. We've heard so much about the dark continent. I wanted to signal to people that this is a book that's not like the other books you've heard about Africa. This is a book that is about narrative correction. If what you think you know is poverty and conflict and disease, let me tell you that this is a different story here. And I think that tries to just give people a sense of what the book is about, without being too sentimental.
There's dignity, there's beauty, there's incredibly sophisticated artistry, there's humor, there's, you know, emotion, there's so much, you know, and when people see that, it definitely, I mean, I've just seen over and over again, it makes them think, you know, and then they start becoming curious, and then they start to reevaluate things. I still think that is really the most immediate, fast-acting kind of agent for helping people rethink Africa.
Tell the people something that they don't know about Africa.
That's a great question. Something they do not know about Africa. There is so much potential, untapped potential in Africa. If you're here in the United States or in Europe, anywhere but Africa, you need to be looking at Africa, because that's where the ball is going. And as individuals, we should not look at where the ball is now, but rather where it's going. That's where we should be, right? Okay. So that's what Africa is for me now. There's so much potential, so much opportunities. And I just want people to stop talking about the old Africa, the old way of perceiving Africa.
Stop talking.
You know, stop talking about that. We need to start having a new conversation, conversation full of potential, conversation that discusses our talents, the innovators, the young people who are really at the forefront of, you know, innovation and technology in the world. This is what Africa has to offer. So that's what I would say to people.
What do you know about Africa?
I know that it's a poor country.
What's your name?
Reinhard.
What do you think about Africa?
About Africa? I was in Lagos 2 weeks ago. Even Lagos is a city where very rich people are living in, but most of the normal guys are so poor, and this is a problem. The countries have to solve on their own.
What do you think about the perception of Africa outside of Africa?
You know, I lived in Africa, so it's a little different, but I think most Americans think it is extremely backward and a hopeless mess. I think that's the popular perception. Because of the media, the only thing they see are the crises, and so that colors their thinking, and it's famine and war.
How do you describe Africa?
You see a mix of everything. I mean, it's still a place that I'd love to visit. At some point in time, it looks beautiful. Yeah, but you know, there's a lot of the negative press right now, but that's what press focuses on right now too.
You see images on Africa on TV and all of that stuff. How do you describe those images?
Oh, that's very sad. How they're living over there, that's very sad. That's sad. But it's a good thing that the people that works with us, that there are a lot of Africans, they'll take their money and they send it over to their country to help their people. So that's very nice to them.
How do you describe Africa?
Misrepresented. When you look at the map, because of the way that it has to be linear, so that we can like put it on a piece of paper, Africa is like is sized down, and Greenland looks huge, almost as big as Africa, and that's just like a symbol for how I feel Africa has been portrayed globally. And you know, a lot of people think, I probably right now when they think of Africa, they think of like Ebola, or they think of AIDS or something. But that's only like three countries, and Africa is huge, right? And so I don't think that people know much about Africa. They just think of the terrible things. So I would say misrepresented.
Why do you think Africa need help?
Every country took to everything in Africa. Because of this reason, everybody is poor in Africa.
So you're saying because of colonialism, they take everything out of Africa?
Yes. Yeah.
And does Africa need help?
I think so. A lot of people are poor. They have war there. I think if they finish a war, it could be better.
How you doing, brother?
I'm right.
What's your name?
My name is Nana Barnes. My father's from Ghana. He's from Ghana, so he's actually there right now. It's funny that you ask. A lot of people don't know that much about Africa. Africa is very important.
How you doing, ladies?
Hi.
What's your name?
Rochelle. Carrie. Javon.
Where you guys from?
Barbados.
What do you know about Africa?
I know it's very beautiful.
I was about to say, yeah, it's gorgeous. I have a friend from there. She's from Ghana, I think. She says it's gorgeous. Yeah. Well, basically what they know.
Why do you think it's beautiful?
Because I saw South Africa, especially when Nelson Mandela had died, and they did the specials on Nelson Mandela. It showed a lot of South Africa, and I realized it was gorgeous.
I watched Blended and realized that it was really good. So yeah, and they have really good resources. So I figured they should be gorgeous. Yeah.
Natural resources. That's the good thing with Africa. Everything is natural. But you won't know, you won't tell until you go over there and see for yourself. It's not what you see on TV. Like you see what this NGO, non-governmental organization, showing about Africa, the bad part of Africa, which is normal anyway. They have to show it because that's the way they raise money for their organization. But what I think about Africa is one of the best continents in the world.
I mean, you have to know, first of all, this place is a continent, not even a country, you know? Because if you think that Africa is always one country, it means you don't know nothing about Africa. So we need to promote that, we need to explain to people, you know?
What do you think about the world's perception of Africa?
The media always show the negative side. They never ever show the good side of Africa.
They always show in any aspect, in any countries, in any continent, they have the good and the bad side. But in our continent, they always show the bad side. They never show the good side. The youth gotta come together and make people know that what they're writing and what they're saying about Africa is completely wrong, and show them the positive side of Africa.
The challenges of countering the misconception and prejudice facing Africa are daunting. But together, we can change.
We live in a racist world, and I think that there is there's sort of a hegemonic trickle-down ethos that has happened, and I think that if you dominate a people and tell them for generations and generations and generations that their humanity is worth less than somebody else's, it is unavoidable that people start to believe that, and like they believe the mythology that is externally imposed, but then sort of accepted dehumanization.